Hey everyone, Totes My Goats here. Just wanted to come back and show you the rest of this tutorial. So far as we continue to progress, we just talked about how to add ruts into our terrain. Now we'll just kind of get on to the final touches with our color and some of our masks that we've used. So I've got our final height map. As I stated before, you probably don't need to actually put these ruts or these rocks into your real height map unless you want. I would test it. I would see, if you like that. But as I've kind of discussed with some other track builders, it's better to be more deliberate in placing berms or jumps, especially. But anything that's kind of going to affect your height map, try to be deliberate with it if possible. So that being said, even though I do mark this height map for export, you really don't have much of a use for it unless you want to use this height map for other things outside. Potentially like Quixel, definitely maybe in Blender, things like that. But you're not going to really make any changes at this point to this final height map. You want to make all of your changes to your height map before you get to this node. Basically, whatever you're putting into this node is what you're going to make your changes to. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to talk about colors, okay? So all these colors and things will potentially make changes to our height map, but we're not really going to deal with those right now. So I'll talk about the boreal map just to kind of get you started with maybe adding some vegetation colors to your map. Um, and this could be used for creating your grass mask, like where you want to place your 3D grass, or potentially where you want to put your trees or Blender bushes, your bushes from Blender. So you could use this arboreal node to start yourself out with a nice little mask, color mask, if you will. So I take our height map, I add or I drag it out to the arboreal output node, and then I inhibit the uh, arboreal with the layout mask so that it doesn't put any trees or whatever onto the track. Now I played around with a few of these to kind of see what I like, but it's totally up to you as to what your preference is. I think they all sort of grow differently or have different traits to them, so feel free to play with it. But I liked, excuse me, what I came up with on the conifer stuff, because I don't know, it looks pretty good. It's not overwhelming and it looks fairly natural. So I take the arboreal node, I've set it to conifers, and then I've reduced the height to 25% and changed the growth to wild, reduce the flows, I believe, and then also reduce the consolidate flows down to 0. And that's going to kind of give you like just very much more sporadic or, vegetation that will grow instead of clumpy, be a little bit more like, I think it's more natural looking to do it that way. Um, well, at least for the terrain look that I'm going for. Yeah, then I also decided to reduce the altitude to about 50% so I don't have a bunch of bushes and terrain on the top. And then also change the slope to just about 12 degrees with 10-degree fall off. That way, on some of these steep parts of the terrain, we're not getting, plants coming in or being added. And that's about all I did for that particular node. Um, and so the output of the arboreal node actually outputs height map changes. I think it's a really interesting concept. I think in the future, I'm going to experiment with using a dual height map to put arboreal bushes down, kind of fake the bushes in MX bikes. We'll see what that does. Um, but you can see here, it's creating this texture on your height map, which isn't something that you want to keep ultimately, but I think it, for the purpose of just kind of seeing what it might look like, it's really nice to see kind of how your bushes or plants or vegetation might look with that happening. So, but anyway, we'll move on. I take one mask or take one output and put it into this transform. The reason why I do a transform is because you don't have to change anything and it just kind of keeps this image the way it is. You could just output this node and then you have this nice little mask image if you want, or you can do whatever you want. So I use the transform a lot on things. I think I was tweaking some stuff earlier and left them as a transform, but in this case, I probably don't need these. So you could ignore that and just take these outputs directly to this combine node, um, where I've chosen to blend it with a 0% ratio, which kind of seems a little weird, but this is what you end up with in the beginning. And then once you combine it with this blend and level it and blur it, this is the mask I ended up with. So it's what I liked. Um, and yeah, it's just taking all of that plant and shrub data and outputting it and then kind of tweaking it a little bit. And I send it over to the sat maps. Now the sat maps is going to create a green sat map initially because I don't have any way to mask off the sat map. There's nothing to kind of control that. That happens later when you start combining all of your sat maps. So right now, this is just a green sat map that we will later combine into our final color. So I'll show you that now, so you can kind of see how that all comes through later. But you can see on our sat map, once it all comes in, that green texture or some of that will follow through. And that's because you saw the mask or this combine node, right? The output of this node is just this black and white image, which you can feed to the mask for a combine. So when you're combining something, this first input is the primary input. So everything is going to kind of start with this, and then the next the blend method is going to blend the next input, right? So if you add a mask, it's only going to happen like that blending or combining is only going to happen where the mask allows it. So it's going to keep the primary input or leave that all alone and then add the second or blend in the second using the mask. Now, something I've been playing with, which I don't know if I like it, it all just kind of depends on how it turns out in the final result. If you want to use this color map, you can use that. But I choose to do a multiply of 100% to get these colors to look the way they do in Gaea. Now, I've got to be honest, I don't know if I like how they're turning out at the moment excuse me, I'm a little tired, at the moment in MX Spikes. So I'm tweaking that, trying to figure this out a little bit, but I do kind of like the results of multiply. So we'll stick with that. But yeah, as you can see, this is what you end up with. If I just like kind of change the multiply, you can see it's not very dark. Like it's adding that green and you can control how dark you want that green to come through. I think that's kind of nice. And that's our vegetation, just to kind of give you an example of where we're going with the colors. Okay. The next step, we'll take that original height map that we used kind of with the ruts baked in. And then we're going to go down here and feed that data to a slope node, which I have set to 0 min and 20 degrees max. So you can see it's only kind of getting the fairly flat parts and then has a nice smooth gradient drop off there. Take the rock map. And then sometimes it's better to invert this, which I actually forgot to do. I'm kind of curious. I'm going to come back later and see what happens if I invert this rock map. We'll see. I think I typically will uninvert it. That makes sense. Sorry, I got confused. You're supposed to uncheck this or at least make sure you're not inverting this rock map. And then we're also going to feed it to the texture node where I just kind of change some of this scaling. And then I like to reduce the chaos just to kind of keep the textures from being a little, I don't know, hard edged. The chaos seems to sort of blend out some of it a little bit better. It's hard to say. And I haven't quite figured out, you get these weird little waves that occur sometimes with Gaea. I don't really know what to do with that. So we'll just keep moving on and see what happens. And then we talked about this before, but I've taken the layout mask, I've inverted it so that I want the off track to now be, dealt with. And then I've set that as the mask for this flow node. And the flow data we're getting again from that final height map. And so I just want to get all the flow data that's surrounding the track because I want to add my own colors in for this. Like you can control the colors so that this flow looks nice, or if you want the flow to be snow or something, or ice, or if you want the flow to be water, or if you have something in mind for that, you could do that. All I'm giving you is an example. It doesn't have to be flow, but it'll make sense in a second as to how we use all this stuff combined. So one more look at the slope, your rock map, and your texture. And again, I just kind of take the rock map and texture and screen it. Not a huge change. It's just something I typically do to kind of give myself a little more control later on. And then I combine it again with the slope data that we had. So it kind of removes, it's taking down that mask because I've multiplied it by 100%. So I'm taking down the mask for the steep parts in the terrain. And the reason I do that is just kind of give yourself a little bit more variance on those areas. I think you might want the rock to be a little more rocky, or maybe it should be a little darker, more exposed when it happens like that. So again, you can give yourself just some control or options to that terrain. And then I like to take the terrain, and you can start out with as many sat maps as you want. In this example, let's start with just 2, and you really probably will want 1 to kind of look at, and then we'll talk about how you incorporate 2 or add to this terrain. Like this is going to be your entire base color, if you will. You need to pick a color or a sat map that you're going to use as your entire base color, and everything else is going to basically be added to this color. So I chose to choose this color. I thought it was very nice, 119. Kind of cranked up the bias. I think it's got some blue at the bottom that I wasn't enjoying very much with the rest of my terrain. So, I just cut the bottom, clip that out. I set the input clarity and auto level, and I was very happy with this as my base color. I think this kind of looks natural to me. I'll talk about it again later in MX Bikes. It didn't turn out the way I wanted, but it looks pretty good, I think, here in Gaea. So anyway, here's your sat map, number 1. And then I took another sat map that was kind of wild, and you can choose whatever you want. This is the color I wanted for the flow that is happening in the terrain. And if you look here, we take this color, which I've actually set to a very strong bias as well to get more red out of it than gray. And then I've only said to combine that red with the terrain where the flow exists, right? So we talked about the flow mask. And so I've combined that and said, okay, let's only add the red, right? We're going to blend in the red where this flow exists. That's what you end up with. Pink, pink, pink. And then, yeah, we just combine that with our base color. Okay, now let's talk about our rut colors. As you can see, it's kind of, you got something cool coming through, but it's not quite what we're looking for. I don't think it is, actually. So what I do is I take that height map data, again, no big deal. We run this through to the soil data. And then I kind of take a look and go, I'm happy with the variance. I think that looks like a good rut mask. There's also this curvature, which gives you a little bit more strength in some of these colors, a little more equalized values, if you will. And I kind of come in and combine them. So I wanted the ruts to have a very strong difference between the dirt that was lower and the dirt that was higher, so that when I added a sat map, I could get a very good kind of, you know, coloration with my ruts. You'll see kind of how that comes into play. But got a curve, got the soil, and then again, just added this multiply to get that color to pop through. And then I auto leveled it. And then again, that's going to make it very black and white too. So you get more white and more black by doing it that way. And it looks a little pixelated. It might be a little too hard edged, so I blur it down. Again, I'm very happy. I think a lot of people would be very happy with this result in terms of just like what a edge mask or what a rut mask looks like. So pretty cool so far. And all I did was just pick one stat map that I liked for my colors. So I chose this one, and I kind of messed around with the bias and clipping the colors because as I added more of this dark color, it was too dark. It was too unnatural looking, and I didn't like it. So you can play around with that to figure out what you like. And again, just keep in mind there's all sorts of different categories of colors. And it's funny because like for the rocky area, I think I was using sandy colors, and then for the sandy areas or maybe the soily areas, I was using the rocky colors. So there's a lot of different colors in there to figure that out with, but got this sat map going for the track and the ruts. And then so if we look back at, here's our base color where we added the flow with red. I just take that color, or this is now my new base color. And so I would add the terrain, or I'm sorry, the terrain. I keep saying that, the ruts color to all of that too. So I just multiply 65%. And you can change that, right? Like, so I put that to 100% just to show you how it's pretty dark. But multiply, I felt like gave me more control as to how much color was really affecting things. So, yeah, that's your sat map going from there. Again, multiply kind of does things a little bit differently. It's going to look a little weird at first, but you got to play with it and see what you like. So that is your base color combined with your uh, terrain. Or I keep saying that. I don't know why. With your ruts. And then again, we'll jump back to the vegetation. And then we'll bring all of that together. So, your base color, right? You start out with your base color here. Then you kind of say, okay, now let's add some color to that. And that's now your base color. Now let's add some color to this. And now this is your base color. And then just add that to your vegetation, or add your vegetation to your base color. And now you have your vegetation base color. So you can mark that for export. That would be a good color map to start with and help you test in MX bikes as you're sculpting. I'm sure one of the biggest hurdles to get over when you're testing in MX bikes is, does my track even look good as I'm doing all this? I think this could really speed that up. So as you're making tweaks or whatever to your terrain, like I said, you come in here and just refresh this file. All these things down the line are going to refresh. We talked too about how to mask off some of this stuff as well. So coming in later on, I'll bring that part of the tutorial in the final touches. But that is going to be how you generate your colors. And yeah, I'm going to come back to the normals and spec, which we've actually already covered. In a previous one, I discussed how to do the cromlem, which is basically just taking your height map and then combining it with a blurred version of your height map and then subtracting it. I usually do about 75%. And then you end up with this kind of, it's like an equalized, semi-flattened height map. Still retains the low level details, but also kind of pushes down some of the high level details so that they all are fairly even. So you're going to need that cromlem, or at least that technique in the future for some other stuff. But primarily what I've done is I've used this for my normal map, as well as creating it over here. We combine it, add the rock noise, and then I actually add the rock noise and the ruts. This is a punker Jeffy technique. So sorry for giving away the secret sauce, Jeff, but no, it's more like at the end you can create these cromlems or the specular maps, and if you put more detail into the specular map, um, you might end up with a better result. I guess what I'm trying to say is you take this approach that we talked about where we've created the cromlem to start with, and then after you do that, you add your smaller details like your rock noise as well as your ruts, your terrain, and then this we've marked for export, and that's going to be what we create as our specular map. Cool. So that is the color map so far, or the color tutorial. So that should get you going with a pretty good start for creating colors. You can go back to my normals and spec maps video. I think that pretty much covers everything. Um, and I can't remember if I've shown how to kind of take all this information from Gaea and actually put it into Resolute Kraken, which might be worth doing one more tutorial on. So stay tuned for that. Have a good one.